am Elena, 34 years old, and to the outside world, I am just a housewife who dabbles in blogging. In reality, I am the silent founder of a $50 million tech firm, a fact I hid to protect my family. But protection was the last thing on my husband's mind when we walked into the Superior Court last Tuesday. The air in the courtroom was stale, smelling of floor wax and broken promises. My husband Jason sat across from me looking like he had already won the lottery. He was flanked by his attorney, a man wearing a three-piece Armani suit that cost more than the Honda Civic I had driven to the courthouse. They were whispering and snickering, sliding papers back and forth with the confidence of predators who had cornered a wounded animal. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over her spectacles at the asset division proposal Jason's legal team had just submitted. "Your Honor," Jason's attorney began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "My client is the sole breadwinner. He is a venture capitalist managing high-stakes portfolios. Mrs. Vance has not held a job in 7 years. She contributes nothing to the financial standing of the estate. Therefore, we propose that Mr. Vance retains the primary residence in the Hamptons, the penthouse in Manhattan, the collection of vintage Porsches, and all investment accounts." I watched Jason. He did not even look at me. He was checking his watch, probably calculating how soon he could leave to meet his mistress. "And what does Mrs. Vance get?" the judge asked, her tone unreadable. The lawyer smirked. "She retains full custody of their son Leo and the 2018 Honda. Given the child's medical condition, we feel this is generous as she will have plenty of time to care for him since she is unemployed." My lawyer, a kind but disheveled man named Mr. Henderson, started to stand up, his face red with indignation. He was ready to fight. He was ready to pull out the forensic accounting files we had prepared, but I reached out and placed my hand firmly on his forearm. I squeezed it, signaling him to stop. I looked straight at Jason. For the first time, he met my eyes, expecting tears. He expected me to beg. He expected the woman who folded his laundry to plead for a roof over her head. Instead, I leaned into the microphone. My voice did not shake. "I agree," I said. The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Jason blinked, confused. "You agree?" the judge asked, surprised. "You understand that you are waiving your right to equitable distribution of real estate valued at over $10 million? I nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I want full custody of my son. If the price for my son is the houses and the cars, then my husband can have them. He can have it all. Every brick, every tire, every bank account listed in this motion." Jason let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. He whispered something to his lawyer, who looked skeptical but shrugged. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was desperate to escape. They hastily pushed the papers toward me before I could change my mind. I signed my name with a steady hand. The scratch of the pen against the paper was the only sound in the room. The judge banged her gavel. "So ordered." Jason stood up, buttoning his jacket, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. He leaned over the table as I packed my bag. "You always were a pushover, Elena," he hissed low enough that only I could hear. "Enjoy the Honda. Hope it starts in the winter." I looked up at him and smiled. It was not a sad smile. It was the smile of someone who watches a man walk off a cliff he thinks is a step. "Thank you, Jason," I said softly. "You have no idea what you just did." He frowned, the smile faltering for a split second, but then he turned and strutted out of the courtroom. He did not know that by taking the houses he had just assumed liability for $15 million in hidden debt that was attached to those deeds. He did not know that the penthouse was leveraged 3 times over, and he certainly did not know that the only thing keeping his financial world from imploding was my private capital, which he had just legally severed himself from. Before we continue to see how Jason life unravels while I build my empire, hit that like button. If you believe that dignity is worth more than a mansion, subscribe and turn on notifications, because you do not want to miss the moment his lawyer realizes they made a fatal mistake. Now let us go back 3 months to the night I realized my marriage was over. It was the annual midsummer fundraiser at our estate in the Hamptons. The lawn was manicured to perfection, dotted with white tents and waiters carrying trays of champagne. This was Jason World. He needed everyone to believe he was the king of venture capital. I was just the prop. I was wearing a simple navy dress I had bought on sale, trying to blend into the background as Jason held court with potential investors. I walked through the crowd, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres, because Jason had cut the catering staff budget at the last minute and told me to pitch in. "Elena over here," Jason called out. I walked over, forcing a smile. He was standing with 3 men in expensive suits. "Gentlemen, this is my wife, Elena," Jason said, gesturing to me as if I were a piece of furniture. "She is a stay-at-home mom. She keeps the domestic fires burning so the real work can get done." The men chuckled politely. One of them, a man named Sterling, looked at me with pity. "It must be nice to have so much free time, Mrs. Vance. My wife is a surgeon. She is always exhausted." Actually, I started to say, wanting to mention the coding project I had been working on until 4 a.m. But Jason cut me off. "Oh, Elena is great at the little things, organizing the pantry, scheduling the pool cleaner. She is very domestic. Now, honey, go get Mr. Sterling a refill." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I was not his wife. I was his servant. I turned to walk away, my grip tightening on the silver tray, when I bumped into someone. It was Bianca, Jason's younger sister. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my car, holding a glass of heavy red wine. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my outfit with open disdain. "Oh, Elena," she drawled, her voice loud enough to attract attention. "I did not see you there. You blend in so well with the help." Before I could respond, she tilted her glass. It was not an accident. I watched the dark red liquid cascade down the front of my pale navy dress. The cold wetness soaked through to my skin instantly. The chatter nearby stopped. People turned to look. "Oops," Bianca giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "My bad. But honestly, Elena, that dress was tragic anyway. I saw that on the clearance rack at Macy last season. Consider this a favor. You need a wardrobe update." Jason was standing right there. He saw everything. He saw his sister humiliate his wife in front of 50 guests. I looked at him, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell Bianca to apologize. Jason just sighed, looking annoyed. "Elena, go change. You are making a scene. And try not to stain the carpet on your way up." I stood there, the wine dripping down my leg. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I looked at the glass in Bianca's hand. It was a Chateau Margaux, a vintage that cost $2,000 a bottle. I knew the price because I paid the credit card bill. The card was in Jason's name, but the funds came from a joint account that I had been replenishing with my freelance consulting money. Money Jason thought was just pennies I saved from couponing. I looked at Bianca, then at Jason. "You are right," I said, my voice calm. "It is just a dress." I walked away. I did not run. I did not cry. I went upstairs, took off the dress, and put it in a trash bag. That night, I did not sleep. I sat by the window, looking at the party below, watching Jason laugh and pour more of my money down the throats of people who despised me. I realized then that I was not a partner in this marriage. I was a resource they were draining dry, but resources can run out. The real breaking point, however, came 2 weeks later. It was 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. The house was dark. Jason was not home. He had said he had a late meeting in the city and would stay at a hotel. I was sleeping lightly, a habit I developed since Leo was born. Suddenly, a sound woke me, a wheezing, gasping sound coming from the room next door. I bolted out of bed and ran into Leo's room. My 6-year-old son was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest, his face pale and clammy. His lips were turning a terrifying shade of blue. "Mommy," he gasped, the air whistling in his tight throat. "Cannot breathe." It was a severe asthma attack. I grabbed his emergency inhaler from the nightstand, but when I shook it, it was empty. Panic surged through me like an electric shock. We had used the last dose 2 days ago, and I had put a reminder to refill it, but Jason had taken the car that day, leaving me stranded. "It is okay, baby. Breathe with Mommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, while my heart hammered against my ribs. "We are going to the pharmacy. Now." I wrapped Leo in a blanket and carried him to the Honda. The engine sputtered before roaring to life. I drove like a maniac to the 24-hour CVS, my hand reaching back to squeeze Leo's leg, reassuring him. At the pharmacy counter, the pharmacist took one look at Leo's blue lips and rushed to get the medication. "It is a high-dose steroid inhaler and a nebulizer solution," she said, typing rapidly into the computer. "That will be $180. Insurance is flagging it as too soon to refill, so you have to pay out of pocket." I nodded frantically. "I do not care. Just give it to me." I pulled out the Joint American Express card. This was the card for emergencies. This was the card Jason insisted we use for family expenses. I swiped it. Processing. The machine beeped. A harsh, dissonant sound. Declined. I stared at the screen. "That is impossible," I said, my hands shaking. "Try it again. Please." The pharmacist looked sympathetic. She swiped it again. Declined. Contact issuer. I pulled out my debit card, the one connected to the household account where I deposited my small checks. Swiped. Declined. Insufficient funds. My blood ran cold. There should have been $3,000 in that account. I had just deposited a check yesterday. "I need this medicine," I whispered, looking at Leo. He was wheezing harder, his eyes wide with fear. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jason. It rang 4 times before he picked up. The background was not a quiet hotel room. I heard music, soft jazz, and a woman laughter. "Jason," I said, my voice tight. "The cards are declined. All of them. I am at the pharmacy. Leo is having an attack. I need to pay for his medicine." There was a pause. Then Jason's voice, cold and slurred, likely from alcohol. "I canceled the Amex, Elena, and I transferred the cash to my investment account. You have been spending too much on groceries. You need to learn to budget." What I screamed, drawing looks from the other customers. "Jason, this is not groceries. Our son cannot breathe. He is turning blue." "Unlock the card." "He is fine," Jason drawled. "He always has these little fits. Give him some water. And stop interrupting me. I am in a meeting." A woman voice in the background giggled. "Is that the maid?" Jason laughed. "Something like that." "Listen, Elena, if you want money so bad, sell some of those stupid purses you hoard. Do not call me again tonight." Click. He hung up. I stood there, the silence of the phone screaming in my ear. He had cut me off. He had emptied our accounts, and he had left our son to suffocate while he laughed with his mistress. Mommy Leo wheezed. I looked at him. I looked at the pharmacist who was holding the bag of medicine but could not hand it over without payment. "Wait here," I told the pharmacist. "Do not put it back." I grabbed Leo's hand and ran out of the store. Across the street there was a 24-hour pawn shop with a neon sign buzzing in the rain. I ran through the traffic dragging my sick child. The pawn shop smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. The man behind the glass looked at me, a woman in pajamas, hair wild, holding a gasping child. "I need cash," I said, slamming my hand on the counter. I pulled the ring off my finger. It was a platinum band with a single modest diamond. It was the only thing of value I technically owned. It was my wedding ring. How much, I asked. The man put a loop to his eye. He looked at the ring, then at me. 200. "It is worth 5,000, I cried. 200. Take it or leave it." I did not hesitate. "Take it." He counted out 10 $20 bills. I snatched the money, leaving the symbol of my marriage on the scratched glass counter. I did not look back. We ran back to the pharmacy. I threw the cash on the counter. I tore open the package right there in the aisle, pressing the inhaler to Leo's mouth. 1 puff, 2 puffs. We waited. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Leo's chest heaved, and then a long, clear breath. The color started to return to his cheeks. He looked up at me, his eyes tired. "Thank you, Mommy." I hugged him, burying my face in his neck so he would not feel me shaking. But I was not shaking from fear anymore. I was shaking from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. We drove home in silence. I put Leo to bed, set up the nebulizer, and rubbed his back until he fell into a deep sleep. I walked into our bedroom. I looked at the empty side of the bed where Jason usually slept. I went to the closet and pulled out an old, battered laptop bag from the back shelf, the one Jason thought contained old family photos. I sat at the kitchen table. The house was silent. I opened the laptop. It was not a consumer-grade machine. It was a custom build with encrypted drives. I typed in a password that was 30 characters long. The screen flickered to life. A black screen with green command lines. System access granted. User ghost _admin. I was not just a housewife. I was the creator of Sentinel, a predictive algorithm used by 3 of the largest hedge funds in the world. I had built it under a pseudonym before I met Jason, and I had kept it dormant, letting the royalties pile up in an offshore trust while I played the role of the supportive wife. I navigated to the banking interface. I pulled up Jason financial profile. I saw everything. The transfers to Amber Consulting, the crypto losses, the mortgages. He thought he had cut me off. He thought he had the power because he held the credit cards. I cracked my knuckles and started typing. Protocol override initiate. If he wanted to play with money, I would show him what money really was. I was done being Elena the wife. Tonight the architect was back online, and the first thing on my to-do list was to prepare a little surprise for his divorce filing. I typed one final command, asset segregation, stage 1. The screen blinked, processing. I closed the laptop and smiled. The same eerie calm I would feel months later in the courtroom washed over me. "Enjoy your hotel room, Jason," I whispered to the empty kitchen, "because it is the last luxury you will ever afford." 3 days after I accessed Jason's computer, I sat in a booth at Joe's Diner on the far edge of Queens. The vinyl seat was cracked, and the table was sticky with syrup that no amount of wiping seemed to remove. It was a place where truck drivers and shift workers ate in silence, burying their faces in newspapers or phones. It was the last place anyone would look for Mrs. Jason Vance, the supposed trophy wife from the Hamptons. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. I was 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee, keeping my sunglasses on. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with the slow, heavy rhythm of a war drum. I had seen the numbers on Jason's screen, but I needed confirmation. I needed a forensic eye to verify what my algorithm had flagged. The bell above the door jingled. Marcus walked in. Marcus was my brother-in-law married to Bianca, the woman who had poured wine on my dress. But Marcus was nothing like his wife or her family. He was a tall, broad-shouldered African-American man with a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, but he looked uncomfortable in this setting, not because of the diner, but because of the secrecy. Marcus was a senior forensic accountant for one of the top firms in the city. He spent his days hunting down white-collar criminals who hid money in offshore shells. He spotted me and slid into the booth opposite mine. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how I was. He placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. The sound of it hitting the formica surface was heavy like a judge's gavel. "You took a risk calling me Elena," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. "If Bianca knew I was here or Jason, it would be war." I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "I know. But you are the only one in that family who deals in facts, Marcus. Everyone else lives in a fantasy. I need to know how deep the fantasy goes." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. He had always been kind to me in a distant professional way. He was the only one who didn't interrupt me at dinner, the only one who asked my opinion on current events instead of my opinion on napkin colors. I think he suspected even then that I was more than I appeared. He tapped the envelope. "I ran the preliminary audit on the entities you asked about," he said. "Elena, I do not know how to tell you this gently, so I will just say it. Jason is not wealthy. Jason is a financial corpse walking." I kept my face impassive. I knew it, but hearing it from Marcus made it real. "Go on." Marcus opened the folder. He pulled out a stack of spreadsheets marked with red ink. "Jason's venture capital firm has not had a successful exit in 4 years, Marcus explained, pointing to a column of negative numbers. "He has been living on management fees and credit, but the credit ran out 6 months ago. To maintain his lifestyle, the parties, the cars, the mistress, he started refinancing assets." He flipped the page to a document titled Property Title Search. "This is the Hamptons house," Marcus said, "the house I loved. The house where I planted the hydrangea garden with my own hands because Jason refused to hire a gardener that year. He refinanced it," I said. "I saw the bank notifications in the trash." Marcus shook his head grimly. "No, Elena. He didn't just refinance it, he leveraged it to the hilt. He took out 3 separate home equity lines of credit against the property value using forged valuations. He paid off the appraiser to inflate the house's worth to $15 million so the bank would lend him more. I leaned forward. And what is the actual value in this market? Maybe 10 million? Maybe less if we sell quickly. Marcus looked me dead in the eye. He owes $18 million on that house, Elena. The mortgages and the credit lines combined exceed the value of the property by $8 million. The house is underwater. It is a sinking ship made of marble and glass. I sat back absorbing the number. $8 million in negative equity. If we sold the house today, we would still owe the bank $8 million. And the penthouse, I asked. Same story, Marcus said. He used the penthouse as collateral for a high-risk crypto loan. That loan was called in last week. If he doesn't pay, they seize the title. Marcus leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a whisper. Here's the part that scares me, Elena. I looked at the divorce draft Jason is preparing. I saw it on his desk when I was in his home office yesterday. He is not planning to hide assets from you. I frowned. He isn't. No, Marcus said. He is planning to give them to you. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I stared at Marcus. He wants you to fight for them. Marcus continued, his intensity growing. He is counting on your lawyer fighting for the marital lifestyle. He wants the judge to award you the Hamptons house and the penthouse as part of your settlement. He knows you do not understand finance. He thinks you will see a big house and think you won a prize. Marcus tapped the red numbers on the spreadsheet again. If you take that house, Elena, you take the debt. The mortgage is in both your names, but the equity lines were taken out fraudulently. If the divorce decree assigns the property to you, the banks will come after you for the shortfall. Jason walks away clean. He files for personal bankruptcy, sheds the debt, and leaves you holding an $8 million bag of rocks while you try to raise Leo. A chill ran down my spine. It was diabolical. It was brilliant. Jason wasn't just trying to leave me. He was trying to bury me. He wanted to trap me in a golden cage that would crush me the moment I stepped inside. He wanted me to fight for my own destruction. He thinks I am stupid, I whispered. He is banking on it, Marcus said. He told Bianca yesterday that he expects you to be emotional and greedy. He said you would never let him keep the house because you love the status too much. He is manipulating your pride to destroy your future. I looked down at the coffee cup. My reflection was distorted in the black liquid. Jason thought he knew me. He thought I was a woman who defined her worth by square footage and zip codes. He didn't know that for the last 5 years I had been building a digital fortress that made his venture capital fund look like a lemonade stand. Thank you, Marcus, I said quietly. Marcus wasn't finished. There is one more thing. He pulled out a final sheet of paper. It was a printout of a transaction record. He emptied the college fund, Marcus said, his voice thick with disgust. The account for Leo. The one his parents set up when he was born. It had $200,000 in it. It is gone. Transferred to an offshore betting site 3 days ago. The coffee cup cracked in my hand. I hadn't squeezed it, but the ceramic handle snapped clean off. Leo's money. The money for his future. The money for his medical care if my insurance failed. That was the line. He had crossed the line from selfish to monstrous. I carefully placed the broken handle on the table. My hand was steady. He stole from his own son, I stated. Marcus nodded. He is desperate, Elena. A desperate man has no morality. You need to be careful. If you expose him now, he might do something reckless. He might try to hide the debt better or drag this out in court for years until the legal fees bleed you dry. I looked at the dossier one last time. I memorized the numbers, the loan maturity dates, the bank names. I stood up. I reached into my purse and pulled out a $20 bill for the coffee, then hesitated. I pulled out a separate plain white envelope and slid it to Marcus. "What is this?" he asked. "Payment for your services," I said. "Elena, I am family. I do not want your money. Besides, you do not have any." "Open it later," I said. "Just trust me." Inside was a cashier check for $50,000 drawn from a shell company he would never trace back to me. It was enough to pay off his student loans, a burden I knew weighed on him. It was a down payment on the loyalty I would need later. I put on my sunglasses. "Marcus," I said. You said he wants me to fight for the house. Yes, he wants me to scream and cry and demand my share of the empire. Exactly. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Then I will disappoint him. I am going to give him exactly what he asks for. I am going to let him win. Marcus looked confused. Elena, you didn't hear me? If he keeps the house, he keeps the debt. But he also keeps the assets. You will walk away with nothing. No, Marcus, I said, turning to leave. I will walk away with my freedom. And when the bank comes to foreclose on his victory, I will be watching from a very safe distance. I walked out of the diner into the bright, harsh sunlight of Queens. The noise of the city hit me, but inside my head, everything was quiet. The plan had crystallized. I didn't need a lawyer to fight for me. I needed a performance. I needed to play the role of the defeated wife one last time. I hailed a yellow cab. Where to, the driver asked. Manhattan, I said. I have an appointment with a divorce lawyer. And take the long way. I have some thinking to do. As the cab merged into traffic, I pulled out my phone. I had a notification from my private banking app. My latest algorithm licensing fee had just cleared. The balance on my secret account ticked up by another 7 figures. Jason wanted to play a game of financial chicken fine. I was driving a tank and he was on a bicycle. It was time to pave the road for his collision course. The investigation was over. The execution was about to begin. The silence in the dining room was heavy enough to choke on. I had prepared a simple roast chicken for dinner, a recipe Jason used to claim he loved back when we were first married and money was tight. Now the smell of rosemary and lemon just seemed out of place, like a relic from a life that no longer existed. I heard the front door open. It did not open with the usual tired click of a husband returning from work. It was thrown open with force, followed by the clatter of high heels on the marble foyer. I did not get up. I stayed seated at the head of the table, my hands folded in my lap. I took a slow breath. I knew this moment was coming. The algorithm I ran on Jason's behavior patterns predicted a confrontation within 48 hours of him draining the bank accounts. He needed to justify his theft by making me the villain. Jason walked into the dining room. He was not alone. Behind him walked Amber. I recognized her immediately from the social media deep dive I had done months ago. She was 24, though she was trying very hard to look older, with heavy contouring makeup and a dress that was far too tight for a Tuesday evening. She worked as his executive assistant, a job title that apparently now included wrecking homes. She looked around the room, her eyes wide, but critical. She did not look at me with guilt. She looked at me with the disdain of a winner looking at the loser. Jason did not say hello. He walked straight to the table and threw a thick stack of papers down next to the roast chicken. The heavy thud echoed off the walls. Sign it, Jason said. I looked at the papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I looked up at him. You brought a guest to dinner, I said calmly. Jason let out a sharp, mocking laugh. This is not a guest, Elena. This is Amber, and she is not here for dinner. She is here to measure the windows for new drapes. Amber stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. She ran a hand over the dining chair opposite me, checking for dust. Hi, Elena, she said. Her voice was high-pitched and sugary fake in a way that made my teeth ache. Jason told me you wouldn't mind. We just want to get a head start on the renovations. Renovations, I repeated. Amber rolled her eyes. Yeah, this whole place is a little dated. It is very grandma chic. All this beige and gray. We want something modern, more gold, more life. She gestured vaguely at the hand-painted wallpaper I had imported from France 3 years ago. It was subtle, elegant, and cost more than her entire education. She thought it was boring. I watched her walk around the room. She picked up a crystal vase, looked at the bottom, and set it down with an unimpressed sniff. She was touching my life with her sticky fingers, erasing me from my own home before I had even left. Jason poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table, not bothering to offer any to me. Amber is moving in, Jason announced. I blinked. Excuse me? Starting next week, Jason said, taking a sip. I am not waiting for the divorce to finalize. This is my house. I pay the mortgage. I want her here. He looked at me waiting for the explosion. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to throw the roast chicken at him. He wanted a reaction that would prove to Amber and himself that I was the crazy emotional burden he described to his friends. But I felt nothing. Actually, that is not true. I felt a cold mathematical satisfaction. Every word he spoke was another nail in his own coffin. "And where do you expect me and Leo to go?" I asked. Jason shrugged. "There is the guest room in the basement, the one near the boiler room. It is warm down there. You can stay there until you find a job in a cheap apartment, or you can go to a motel. I do not really care as long as you are out of the master bedroom by Friday." Amber giggled. It was a cruel sound. "I think the basement is perfect," she said. "It is private. You won't have to see us being happy up here." She walked over to Jason and draped her arm around his neck, looking at me defiantly. I looked at the two of them, a man drowning in debt and a woman who thought she had caught a big fish. They deserved each other. I stood up slowly. Amber flinched slightly, perhaps expecting me to attack her. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark lawn. The landscape lighting was on, illuminating the pool and the pool house. It looked magnificent. It looked like $10 million. "Jason," I said, keeping my back to them, "I need to ask you one question." "Make it fast," Jason snapped. "We have reservations at Nobu." I turned around and looked him directly in the eyes. "Are you absolutely sure you want this house?" Jason looked confused for a second, then his arrogance returned full force. "Of course I want the house, Elena. It is the crown jewel. It is a $10 million estate in the best part of the Hamptons. Why would I let you have it? You could not even afford the landscaping bill." I nodded slowly. "So in the divorce agreement you are demanding full ownership of the property, the title and all liabilities associated with it." Jason stepped forward, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. He was trying to intimidate me. "Yes," he hissed. "I am taking the house. I am taking the cars. I am taking the prestige. You get the kid and the debt-free life of a pauper. Do you understand?" I looked at Amber. She was smirking, already mentally redecorating the living room with gold furniture. "I understand perfectly," I said. I walked back to the table. I picked up the divorce papers. I did not flip through them. I did not read the clauses. I knew what they said because I knew what Marcus had told me. By claiming the asset, Jason was legally claiming the debt attached to it. I reached into the drawer of the sideboard and pulled out a pen. Jason watched me, his eyes narrowing. He expected a fight. He expected me to negotiate. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am giving you what you want," I said. I signed the last page. I dated it. I put the pen down. "There," I said. "It is all yours. The house, the furniture, the wallpaper Amber hates so much. It is all yours, Jason." Jason snatched the papers up, checking the signature, as if he thought I had used disappearing ink. When he saw my name scrawled clearly on the line, his face broke into a grin of pure victory. He looked at Amber and winked. "See, I told you she would fold," he said. Amber clapped her hands. "Oh my God, babe, we have the house." She ran to him and kissed him. I watched them celebrate. I watched them toast to their own destruction. "I have one condition," I said. They broke apart, looking annoyed. "What now?" Jason asked. "I will move to the basement tonight," I said. "I will pack my things, but I want it in writing that I have zero financial responsibility for this property starting immediately. If I am living in the basement like a tenant, I am not paying for the roof repairs." Jason laughed. He laughed so hard he choked on his water. "Deal," he shouted. "God, you are pathetic. You are so scared of spending a dime." "Fine. I will have the lawyer add a waiver tomorrow. You are absolved of all costs. Just stay out of our way." "Thank you," I said. I walked toward the kitchen door. I stopped and looked back at them. Amber was already pulling fabric swatches out of her purse. Jason was pouring himself a drink, looking like the king of the world. "Enjoy the house, Jason," I said softly. "It really is one of a kind." I walked out of the room. As the door swung shut, I heard Amber say, "God, she is such a doormat. How did you stand her for 7 years?" And Jason replied, "She was useful, but now we have the gold mine." I walked down the hallway to the basement stairs. The air grew cooler as I descended. The basement room was small, smelling faintly of damp earth and laundry detergent. It was humiliating. It was a cell. But as I sat on the narrow twin bed, I didn't feel trapped. I pulled out my phone and sent a secure text to Marcus. Message. He took the bait. He is claiming the house and kicking me to the basement. Marcus replied instantly. He just signed his death warrant. The foreclosure notice is already in the system. It will trigger in 30 days. I lay back on the hard mattress. Above me, I could hear their footsteps. They were walking on floors they didn't own. They were sleeping under a roof that belonged to the bank. Let them have their victory lap, I thought. Let them enjoy the view for a few weeks. Because when the tide goes out, they are going to realize they are standing in quicksand. I closed my eyes and listened to the muffled sound of their laughter drifting down through the floorboards. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my enemies digging their own graves and handing me the shovel. The basement room was exactly as Jason had described it. Cold, damp, the kind of place you store forgotten holiday decorations, not the mother of your child. I sat on the edge of the twin mattress listening to the hum of the boiler next to me. Upstairs, I could hear the faint thumping of bass. Jason and Amber were playing music. They were celebrating their victory. They were celebrating the acquisition of the house, the freedom from my dead weight, and the start of their new glamorous life. But while they were popping champagne corks, I was engaging in a different kind of celebration. I was celebrating Jason's arrogance. I opened my laptop again. The screen was the only source of light in the small windowless room. I didn't start by packing my clothes. Clothes were replaceable. What I needed to pack was something far more valuable. I needed to pack Jason's life. You see, for all his posturing as a tech visionary, Jason had a fatal flaw, common among men who think they are untouchable. He was lazy. 7 years ago, when we first bought our Apple devices, he had set up family sharing to save money on app subscriptions. He wanted to share my iCloud storage plan because he didn't want to pay for his own. He never turned it off. He never changed the permissions. He thought I was too technologically illiterate to understand what that meant. He thought family sharing just meant we shared music and photos of Leo. He was wrong. I logged into the main administrative panel. Because I was the organizer of the family group, a role he assigned me because he couldn't be bothered to manage the credit card details. I had access to the location, the backups, and the synchronized data of every device in the network. I clicked on the icon labeled Jason's MacBook Pro. Syncing. A progress bar appeared. It moved quickly. Contacts, calendars, notes, keychains. I wasn't just looking for texts to his mistress. I was looking for the architecture of his lie. And then I found it. Deep inside his Documents folder, which was foolishly syncing to the cloud in real time, there was a subfolder named Project Zeus. My heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Project Zeus was the internal code name for the predictive trading algorithm Jason was pitching to investors. It was the startup he claimed was his genius invention. He had told Forbes magazine that he spent nights coding it in his dorm room. He told his partners that he was the sole architect of the logic engine. I double-clicked the folder. I opened the source code file. I scrolled through lines of Python and C++. It was elegant. It was complex. It was beautiful. And it was mine. Every single line of code in that file was written by me 5 years ago. I had written it during the nights Leo was teething while Jason was out networking. I had created it as a tool to help him analyze market trends because he was struggling at work. I gave it to him to help him keep his job. I never asked for credit. I never asked for shares. I just wanted my husband to succeed. He had taken my work, rebranded it, and built an entire company around it without ever putting my name on a single document. He had stolen my intellectual property and used it to fund the affair with the woman who was currently dancing in my living room. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. He thought he owned this. He thought that because he possessed the file, he possessed the power. But there was something Jason didn't know. There is a rule in software engineering: always leave a back door. I scrolled down to line 42,000. Buried deep within the authentication protocol, hidden under layers of standard encryption, was a small, seemingly innocuous function I had named the failsafe. To an outsider, or even a decent programmer, it looked like a standard error-checking loop. It looked like code designed to prevent the system from crashing if the server got overloaded. But it wasn't. It was a remote kill switch. It was linked to a digital certificate that only I possessed. If that certificate was revoked, something I could do with a single keystroke, the entire algorithm would stop working. It wouldn't just crash, it would lock itself, encrypt its own core logic, and become a useless brick of digital gibberish. I smiled in the darkness. Jason was out there selling licenses to this software for millions of dollars. Hedge funds were running their portfolios on it. If I pulled the trigger now, his company would collapse by morning. But I didn't pull the trigger, not yet. That would be too easy. That would be a mercy killing. I wanted him to feel the squeeze. I wanted him to think he had won everything before I took it all away. I copied the entire source code to an external hard drive. I needed proof that I was the original author. I needed the timestamps. I needed the version history that showed my edits from years ago. Then I went deeper. If he stole my work, he likely stole our money too. I navigated to his saved passwords keychain. Again, because of the family sharing his passwords synced to my device, I saw a login for a bank I didn't recognize. First Cayman Royal Bank. I clicked autofill. The password populated. I was in. The screen refreshed, showing an account balance that made my stomach turn. $2 million. The account holder was listed as Blue Horizon Holdings Limited. I quickly cross-referenced the name. Blue Horizon was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands 3 years ago. I opened the transaction history. Transfer from joint checking, $50,000. Transfer from Leo's college fund, $200,000. Transfer from home equity line, $500,000. There it was, the smoking gun. He hadn't just lost the money in bad crypto deals as Marcus suspected. He had siphoned it. He was laundering our marital assets into a secret account to hide them from the divorce court. He was planning to declare bankruptcy here in the States, wipe out the debt on the house, which would fall to me, and then retire to the Caribbean with Amber and my $2 million. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal. I took screenshots of everything, every transfer, every date, every IP address. I downloaded the monthly statements. I compiled a digital dossier that would make a federal prosecutor salivate. Upstairs, the music stopped. I heard heavy footsteps directly above my head. "Babe, where's the champagne?" I heard Jason yell. "We drank it all." Amber shrieked, laughing. "Go get the bottle from the cellar," Jason said. The vintage Dom Perignon, the one Elena was saving for our 10th anniversary. I heard the cellar door open. It was just down the hall from my room. I quickly shut the laptop and shoved it under the pillow. I grabbed a cardboard box and pretended to be folding a sweater. The door to my room swung open. Jason stood there looking flushed and sweaty. He was holding an empty glass. He looked around the small, depressing room and smirked. "Cozy," he said. "Fits you." He stepped inside, looming over me. "I'm just getting some wine," he said. "I thought I would check on the tenant. Make sure you aren't scratching the paint." I didn't look up. I continued folding the sweater. "I am fine, Jason," I said, "just packing." He laughed. "I almost feel bad for you. Almost. But then, I remember how boring you are. You never had any ambition, Elena. You were always content to just sit in the background." He leaned down, his face close to mine. "That is why you are in the basement, and I am in the penthouse. Evolution, baby. Survival of the fittest." He turned and walked out, grabbing the bottle of vintage champagne from the rack in the hallway. I listened to his footsteps retreat up the stairs. I heard him pop the cork. I heard them cheer. I pulled the laptop back out. He talked about ambition. He talked about survival of the fittest. He had no idea. I opened a terminal window. I typed a command to encrypt the dossier I had just compiled. I named the file The Divorce Gift. I sent a copy to a secure cloud server in Switzerland. I sent another copy to a dead-drop email address only Marcus could access. Jason was right about one thing. This was evolution. But he wasn't the predator he thought he was. He was just the prey fattening himself up before the slaughter. I lay back on the bed staring at the exposed pipes on the ceiling. I didn't need the champagne. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was intoxicating enough. He had the house, he had the wine, he had the girl, but I had the kill switch, and I had the map to his stolen millions. The silent move was complete. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for him to walk right into the center of it. The conference room at Vague and Sterling Jason's chosen law firm was designed to make people feel small. It was all glass and chrome, situated on the 45th floor of a midtown skyscraper, offering a view of the city that cost $500 an hour just to look at. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, to stop them from drumming a rhythm of impatience. Next to me, my attorney, Mr. Henderson, looked like a golden retriever facing down a pack of wolves. He was a good man, a family friend from my childhood, but he was out of his depth here. Opposite us sat Jason and his lawyer, a man named Mr. Blackwood, who had teeth that were too white and a suit that was too shiny. Jason was leaning back in his leather chair, checking his phone. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had already won and was just waiting for the losers to sign the scorecard. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat. The sound was dry and sharp like paper tearing. Mrs. Vance let us not waste time. He began sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. We have reviewed your financial standing, or rather the lack thereof. Since you have been unemployed for 7 years and have no marketable skills to speak of, my client is prepared to offer you a transitional stipend. I looked at the paper. The number was circled in red ink. $500 a month. For 6 months. I looked up, blinking rapidly to simulate shock. $500, I whispered, my voice trembling just enough. That won't even cover a studio apartment in Queens. How am I supposed to live? Jason finally looked up from his phone. He smirked the same arrogant expression he wore when he bought the wrong wine and blamed the sommelier. That is not really my problem, is it, Elena? He said. You are an adult. Get a job at a grocery store, or maybe you can start a blog about how to lose a husband in 10 days. I heard those are popular. Mr. Henderson stiffened beside me. This is insulting, he sputtered. Mrs. Vance supported you while you built your firm. She raised your son. She deserves equitable distribution of the marital assets and substantial alimony. We are asking for $10,000 a month. Mr. Blackwood laughed. It was a cold, practiced sound. $10,000. For what folding laundry, numb? Here is the reality, Mrs. Vance. If you do not accept the $500, we will move to the next phase of our petition. He slid a second folder across the table. This one was thicker. It was labeled Custody Petition. I felt a genuine spike of adrenaline. This was the part I had predicted, but hearing it out loud still made my blood run cold. Jason wants full physical and legal custody of Leo, Mr. Blackwood stated flatly. My head snapped up. No, you cannot do that. Leo is 6. He needs me. I am the one who takes him to his doctors. I am the one who manages his asthma. Jason leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished wood. And how are you going to pay for those doctors, Elena? He asked, his voice dripping with faux concern. You have no income. You have no home. You are going to be living in a motel or a shelter. Do you really think a judge is going to let a sick child live in those conditions? He paused for effect, locking eyes with me. Besides, he continued, twisting the knife. Amber is great with kids. She is younger than you. She has more energy. She is not so ludu. She can actually run around in the park with him without getting tired. Leo likes her. He thinks she is fun. The air left the room. He had used the exact word he knew would break me. He called me slow, dull. And then he insinuated that his mistress, the woman who had mocked my child's illness, would be a better mother than me. I looked down at my hands. I dug my fingernails into my palms until I felt the sharp bite of pain. I needed the pain to focus. I needed to look devastated. I needed to look like a woman who had been completely broken. You cannot take him, I whispered, forcing a tear to slide down my cheek. Please, Jason. He is my whole world. Jason sat back satisfied. He had gotten the reaction he wanted. He turned to his lawyer and nodded. We are willing to be generous, Mr. Blackwood said, sensing the kill. If you agree to the custody arrangement, we might bump the alimony to $700. But Jason keeps the house, the cars, and the portfolio. Leo stays with him during the week. You get visitation every other weekend. Supervised. Supervised. They wanted to treat me like a criminal. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He looked defeated. He started to open his mouth to argue, to suggest a counteroffer, but I kicked him gently under the table. I looked at Jason. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble. I cannot lose him. I sobbed quietly. I cannot let Amber raise him. Then sign the papers, Jason said ruthlessly. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. What if... I started, my voice shaking. What if I give you everything? Jason frowned. What, I do not want the money, I said, the words spilling out in a rush. I do not want the $500. I do not want the alimony. You can keep the house. You can keep the penthouse. You can keep the cars and the stocks and the furniture. You can keep every single thing we own. I leaned across the table, grabbing the edge of the mahogany as if I were begging for my life. Just give me Leo. Full custody, sole legal and physical custody. You can see him on weekends if you want, but he lives with me. And I will walk away. I will sign a waiver right now. No alimony, no child support, nothing. Just my son. The room went silent. Mr. Blackwood looked at me like I had just grown a second head. He leaned over to Jason and whispered furiously, Jason, this is a trick. You should not accept this. We need to ensure... But Jason cut him off. He held up a hand. He was staring at me, his eyes wide with greed. He was doing the math in his head. He was thinking about the $10 million house in the Hamptons. He was thinking about the $3 million penthouse. He was thinking about the monthly alimony checks he wouldn't have to write. He was thinking that he was about to get rid of his wife and keep 100% of the empire. You are saying, Jason said slowly, testing the waters, that if I give you the kid, you will waive all financial claims. Permanently. Yes, I cried. I will sign it right now. I just want my son. I will figure out the money. I will work 3 jobs. I do not care. Just let me have him. Jason looked at his lawyer. Draft it, he commanded. Mr. Blackwood looked uneasy. Jason, wait. If she takes the child and has no support, the court might overturn this later. And why would she give up millions of dollars in assets? Because she is an idiot, Jason snapped, not bothering to lower his voice. Look at her. She is emotional. She is weak. She just wants the kid because she has no life. He turned back to me, a cruel grin spreading across his face. You are pathetic, Elena. You are literally buying your son with your future. You are going to be destitute. I hung my head. I know, I whispered. But he is worth it. Jason laughed. He actually laughed. Fine, he said. It is a deal. You get the brat. I get the life. Mr. Blackwood sighed, shaking his head, but he opened his laptop and began typing furiously. I sat there staring at the table, hiding the cold, hard glint in my eyes. Jason thought I was making an emotional decision. He thought I was sacrificing my financial security for maternal love. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that by taking the house, he was taking the $8 million in hidden debt I had discovered with Marcus. He didn't know that by taking the portfolio, he was taking the shell companies that were currently under audit by the IRS, an audit I had anonymously triggered 3 days ago. He didn't know that by waiving alimony, I was severing the last legal tie that bound my finances to his. If I accepted alimony, his bankruptcy court could claw back that money from me later. By taking nothing, I was immunizing myself from his inevitable crash. And most importantly, he didn't know that I didn't need his money. My offshore accounts were currently generating more interest in a month than he made in a year. The printer in the corner whirred to life. Mr. Blackwood handed the fresh document to Jason. Jason signed it with a flourish, pressing the pen down, hard, scarring the paper. He slid it to me. Sign here, here, and here, he said. And this clause here says you acknowledge that you have had legal counsel and you are entering this agreement of your own free will. No take-backs, Elena. I picked up the pen. My hand stopped shaking. I signed my name, Elena Vance. I signed the waiver of alimony. I signed the transfer of the deeds. I signed the transfer of the car titles. And finally, I signed the custody agreement. Sole custody mother. I put the pen down. Done, I said. Jason grabbed the papers and hugged them to his chest. You are free to go, he said, dismissing me like a servant. Good luck with the job hunt. I hear McDonald's is hiring. I stood up. I signaled Mr. Henderson to pack his briefcase. I walked to the door. My step was light. I felt like a weight of 1,000 pounds had been lifted from my shoulders. Jason, I said, pausing with my hand on the glass door handle. He looked up, annoyed. What? You are right about one thing I said. Amber is much younger than me. She will need all that energy. Why, he asked. To help you pack when the bank comes, I said. I didn't wait for his reaction. I walked out of the office, down the hall, and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I let out a long breath. I had just given away a fortune in imaginary wealth to secure the only thing that mattered. I had my son. I had my freedom. And Jason. Jason had just signed a contract with the devil, and he didn't even read the fine print. The trap was sprung. Now I just had to wait for the snap. The ink on the custody agreement was barely dry when Mr. Henderson cleared his throat again. He looked nervous, shuffling through a small stack of papers at the bottom of his briefcase. This was the moment we had rehearsed. This was the pivot point. If Mr. Henderson played his part too strongly, Jason might get suspicious. If he played it too weakly, Jason might not bother signing the waiver at all. It had to be perfect. Wait, Mr. Henderson stammered, adjusting his glasses. We have one more item. Schedule C. Personal effects and miscellaneous hobbies. Jason rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. He checked his watch again. Jesus, Henderson, Jason groaned. We already split the houses and the cars. What is left? Her toothbrush. She can keep it. I do not want anything she has touched. Mr. Henderson looked at the paper, his hands shaking slightly. It was a brilliant performance. Well, it says here that Mrs. Vance has some personal projects, specifically a laptop computer containing some writing and software experiments. Jason let out a bark of laughter. He turned to his lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, with a look of pure incredulity. Software experiments, Jason repeated, making air quotes with his fingers. You mean her blogs? Mr. Henderson looked offended on my behalf, but weakly. Mrs. Vance has spent a considerable amount of time on these projects, he mumbled. She feels they are marital property since she worked on them during the marriage. Technically, under state law, anything created during the union is subject to a 50-50 split. I held my breath. This was the gamble. By claiming I wanted to keep it, I was forcing Jason to reject it. Jason looked at me. His eyes were filled with pity and amusement. Elena, are you serious? He asked. You want to split your mommy blog with me? What is it this week? Vegan recipes? Or is it that sad little coding course you took online 3 years ago? I looked down at the table, biting my lip. I worked hard on those, I whispered, sounding petty and small. I wrote some code. It might be worth something someday. Jason laughed again, a harsh barking sound that bounced off the glass walls of the conference room. Worth something, he mocked. Elena, you barely know how to reset the router. You think your little Hello World script is an asset? He turned to Mr. Blackwood. She thinks her diary is intellectual property. This is unbelievable. Mr. Blackwood, however, was a lawyer. He was trained to be paranoid. He frowned, looking at me with a sliver of suspicion. Mrs. Vance, what is the nature of this software? Does it generate revenue? I opened my mouth to speak, but Jason cut me off. He did not want to be here anymore. He had the house. He had the freedom. He did not want to get bogged down in a deposition about my hobbies. It generates nothing, Jason snapped. She has never made a dime, Blackwood. It is just junk files taking up hard drive space. He turned to me, his face twisted in a sneer. You know what, Elena, I am feeling generous. I do not want your blog. I do not want your half-finished novels. I do not want your broken laptop. He grabbed the legal pad from Mr. Blackwood and grabbed a pen. Write this down, Jason commanded his lawyer. Mr. Blackwood hesitated. Jason, we should probably just include a standard catch-all clause. No. Jason slammed his hand on the table. I want it specific. I want her to know exactly how little I care about her career. He dictated his voice loud and clear. Jason Vance hereby waives any and all claims, rights, titles, and interests in any intellectual property, creative works, software code, or digital assets created by Elena Vance during the course of the marriage. This waiver applies to all past, present, and future revenue derived from said works. He looked at me, challenging me. Is that what you want, Elena? You want your little hobby all to yourself? I nodded, keeping my eyes wide and watery. Yes, please, I said softly. It is all I have left. Mr. Blackwood typed it out. He looked unhappy about it. He was a shark, and sharks do not like giving away anything, even scraps. But he worked for Jason, and Jason was currently high on the fumes of his own ego. Here, Mr. Blackwood said, sliding the addendum across the table. The clause was there, in black and white. It was absolute. It was comprehensive. It was a death sentence for his financial future. Jason signed it without reading it. He signed it with a flourish, tossing the pen onto the table, as if he were tipping a waiter. There, he said. Happy. Now you can go write your sad little stories and pretend you are a writer. I reached for the paper. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was terrified he could hear it. This was it. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. He thought he was giving away a mommy blog. He didn't know he was giving away the Sentinel algorithm. He didn't know he was giving away the patent-pending AI that I had secretly registered under a holding company 6 months ago. He didn't know that the junk files on my laptop were the foundation of a $50 million acquisition deal that was currently sitting in a DocuSign envelope in my private email waiting for my signature. By signing this waiver, Jason had just legally severed himself from the only asset in our entire marriage that had positive equity. He had fought tooth and nail for a house that was underwater by $8 million, and he had voluntarily thrown away a 50% stake in a tech unicorn because he was too arrogant to believe his wife could be smart. I signed the paper. Thank you, Jason, I said. My voice was steady now. The tremble was gone. You are welcome, he sneered. Now get out. I have a celebration to get to. I stood up. I put the signed addendum into my folder. It felt heavy, not with paper, but with power. I looked at him one last time. He was checking his hair in the reflection of the window. He looked like a man who owned the world. He had no idea that he was already bankrupt. He had no idea that the moment I walked out of this room, I was going to make a phone call that would turn his life into a nightmare. I walked out of the conference room. The hallway was long and quiet. I walked to the elevator and pressed the down button. When the doors closed, shielding me from his view, I allowed myself a single sharp exhale. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Marcus. He picked up on the first ring. Did he sign it? Marcus asked. I looked at the reflection of myself in the polished brass of the elevator doors. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a discarded wife. I saw a CEO. He signed it, I said. He gave up everything. The code is mine. The patent is mine. And the house, Marcus asked. His, I said, along with the debt. There was a pause, and then I heard Marcus let out a low, impressed whistle. Cold-blooded Elena, he said. He wanted a trophy wife. I replied, watching the floor numbers count down. 40, 39, 38. He got exactly what he paid for, a pretty exterior with nothing inside for him to take. I hung up the phone. The elevator dinged. I stepped out into the lobby, into the bustle of New York City. The sun was shining. The air smelled of exhaust and opportunity. I hailed a cab. Where to, the driver asked. The Ritz-Carlton, I said. I have a business meeting, and I need to buy a bottle of champagne. The real celebration was just beginning. Jason had his party tonight, but mine would last for the rest of my life. The snow started falling the moment we stepped out of the Uber that brought us back from the law firm. It was not a gentle, picturesque snowfall. It was a biting, wet sleet that stung the skin and soaked through coats in seconds. A classic New York nor'easter was rolling in, turning the Hamptons into a gray, frozen wasteland. I took Leo's hand. He was wearing his school backpack and shivering slightly. We had come straight from his school pickup to the house just to grab the suitcases I had packed in the basement. I walked up the stone path to the front door. The house loomed over us, massive and imposing. The lights were on inside, casting a warm golden glow onto the snow. It looked like the perfect family home. It looked like the lie I had lived in for 7 years. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key. I slid it into the lock. It stopped halfway. I frowned and wiggled it. I tried to force it. It would not turn. I pulled it out and looked at it. It was the same key I had used yesterday. I tried again. The metal scraped against metal, a harsh grinding sound that echoed in the silence of the driveway. "Mommy, why won't it open?" Leo asked, his teeth chattering. I stepped back and looked at the door. The hardware was different. The brass finish was shinier. He had changed the locks. We had signed the papers less than 2 hours ago. The ink was barely dry. The agreement stated I had 48 hours to vacate the basement unit. But Jason, true to his nature, had decided that 48 hours was too generous. He had decided to accelerate the eviction. I rang the doorbell. Once, twice. No answer. I pounded on the heavy wood. "Jason," I shouted, my voice cracking in the cold air. Jason let us in. "Leo's asthma medicine is in there." Nothing. I stepped back onto the lawn, the slush soaking into my boots. I looked up at the second floor. The master bedroom window was illuminated. The curtains parted. Amber was standing there. She was wearing my white cashmere robe, the one with my initials embroidered on the pocket. She was holding a mug of steaming cocoa. She looked down at us, shivering in the driveway like we were stray dogs she had called animal control to collect. She did not open the window. She just smiled. It was a slow, deliberate smirk. She raised her hand and gave a little wave, a finger wiggle. Bye-bye. Then she closed the curtains. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was not just about the house. It was about erasure. She was wearing my clothes, drinking from my mugs, looking out of my window while my son froze on the doorstep. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with numb fingers. It was a text from Bianca message. "I heard you are finally out. Good luck in the slums, ex-sister-in-law. Hope you like rats." I looked at the phone, then at the house. Rage flared in my chest, hot and violent. I wanted to pick up a rock and smash the window. I wanted to kick the door down. I wanted to scream until the neighbors called the police. But then I looked at Leo. He was watching me. His eyes were wide with fear. He was waiting to see if his mother would crumble. He was waiting to see if we were victims. I took a deep breath. The icy air filled my lungs, cooling the rage, turning it into steel. No, I would not give them the satisfaction of a scene. I would not let Amber watch me cry from behind the safety of those curtains. I knelt down in the snow, ignoring the cold wetness seeping into my jeans. I grabbed Leo by the shoulders and looked him in the eye. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, my voice steady and calm. "We are not going back in there." "But my toys," Leo whined. "My nebulizer." "We will get new toys," I said firmly. "Better toys. And I have a spare nebulizer in my bag. We are going on an adventure." Leo sniffled. "Where are we going?" Dad said we are going to a motel. I stood up. I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the closed curtains. I memorized the feeling of the sleet on my face. I wanted to remember this moment forever. I wanted to remember exactly how low they went, so I would never feel guilty about how high I was about to climb. "Dad is wrong," I said. I opened the Uber app on my phone. Usually I would scroll to the bottom looking for the cheapest option, the Uber pool or the economy ride. I would worry about the surge pricing. I would calculate if we could walk a few blocks to save $2. Not today. I scrolled to the top. Uber Black SUV, Cadillac Escalade or similar. Arriving in 4 minutes. I pressed confirm. The price was $300 for the ride to the city. I didn't blink. I didn't care. 4 minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the snow. The driver, a man in a suit, jumped out and opened the door for us. He looked at the house, then at us, shivering without coats. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, cranking up the heat as we climbed into the leather interior. "We are fine," I said, buckling Leo in. "Just drive." "Where to?" I didn't give him the address of the cheap motel Jason had suggested. I didn't give him the address of my parents' cramped apartment in New Jersey. I gave him an address in Manhattan. The address of a building known for its discretion, its security, and its astronomical rent. It was a serviced apartment building used by diplomats and tech CEOs. I had leased the penthouse suite 3 months ago under the name of my holding company, Vance Logic LLC. The car pulled away. I didn't look back at the house. I watched Leo. He was already warming up, leaning his head against the heated seat. "Mommy, is this a limo?" he asked, touching the leather armrest. "Sort of," I said. "Are we rich?" he asked innocently. I looked out the window as the Hamptons faded behind us, swallowed by the snow and the darkness. "Yes, Leo," I whispered. "We are very rich. We just couldn't tell anyone yet." The drive took 2 hours. When we reached Manhattan, the city lights were blurred by the rain. The SUV pulled up to a glass-fronted building on Park Avenue. A doorman in a uniform stepped out with an umbrella. "Welcome back, Ms. Vance," the doorman said, opening the car door. "We have your groceries delivered as requested." "Thank you, James," I said. We walked into the lobby. It was warm. It smelled of fresh lilies and expensive perfume. The floors were polished marble. We rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. I took out a key card, a sleek black card with no numbers on it. I swiped it. The door clicked open. We stepped inside. The apartment was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the entire city skyline. The Empire State Building glowed in the distance. The furniture was modern, tasteful, and brand new. There was a fire crackling in the gas fireplace. Leo dropped his backpack. "Whoa," he breathed. "Go check your room," I said, pointing to a door on the right. He ran over and opened it. I heard him scream with delight. "Mom, there is a Lego set. A huge one, and a gaming PC." I walked to the window. I looked down at the streets below. Somewhere out there, Jason was probably toasting his victory, thinking I was shivering in a Motel 6 with a vending machine dinner. He had locked me out of a house with an $8 million debt. And in doing so, he had pushed me into a penthouse that was fully paid for by the interest on my savings. I took off my wet boots. I walked onto the plush carpet. I picked up the phone on the marble kitchen island. "Room service," a voice answered instantly. "I would like a bottle of Dom Perignon," I said, "and a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for my son. Oh, and send up the steak dinner, the most expensive one you have." "Right away, Ms. Vance." I hung up. I stood in the center of my new life. The silence here wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. It was the silence of freedom. The departure was over. The arrival had just begun. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. The woman staring back wasn't the shivering, pathetic wife standing in the snow. She was a predator who had just slipped her leash. "Let them have the house," I whispered to the city lights. "I have the kingdom." The heavy oak doors of the superior courtroom closed behind us, shutting out the noise of the hallway. Inside, the air was still and smelled of floor wax and old paper. This was the moment I had been orchestrating for 3 months. To anyone watching, it looked like the end of a marriage. To me, it was the closing of a business deal where I was the only one who had read the fine print. I walked to the plaintiff table. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, pulled out my chair. His hands were shaking slightly. He was a good man, an honest man, and he was terrified that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He had tried to talk me out of this agreement in the car, in the elevator, and even in the lobby. He told me I was walking into poverty. He told me I was letting Jason win. I had to squeeze his hand and tell him to trust me, even though I could not tell him why. Jason sat at the defense table. He looked magnificent in his ignorance. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit that cost $5,000 money that had likely come from the very credit line he was about to steal from me. He was leaning back in his chair, tapping a gold pen against his chin. He did not look at me. He was looking at the clock on the wall, calculating how long this would take, probably wondering if he could make his tea time at the club by 2 o'clock. The bailiff announced the arrival of the judge. We all stood. Judge Harrison was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat and adjusted her glasses, opening the thick file in front of her. She spent a long time reading. The silence in the room stretched out thin and tight like a wire. I watched Jason. He was growing impatient. He cleared his throat loudly. His lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, shot him a warning look, but Jason ignored it. He was used to getting what he wanted when he wanted it. Judge Harrison finally looked up. She did not look at the lawyers. She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice stern, "I have reviewed the settlement agreement submitted by your counsel. I have to be honest with you. In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a division of assets this lopsided." Jason smirked. He thought the judge was complimenting his negotiation skills. The judge continued, her eyes locked on mine. "You are agreeing to waive all claims to the marital residence in the Hamptons. You are waiving all claims to the Manhattan penthouse. You are surrendering your interest in the vehicle fleet, the investment portfolios, and the retirement accounts. And you are doing this while accepting sole physical custody of a child with medical needs and waiving your right to alimony." She paused, leaning forward. "Mrs. Vance, do you understand that if I sign this, you will be leaving a marriage to a wealthy venture capitalist with absolutely no financial safety net? This agreement leaves you destitute." Mr. Blackwood stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, if I may, Mrs. Vance has expressed a strong desire for independence. She is eager to start her new life. My client, Mr. Vance, has generously agreed to take on the burden of the properties and the management of the assets, which I might add requires significant effort." The judge silenced him with a wave of her hand. "Sit down, counselor. I am speaking to the wife." She looked at me again. Her expression was softening. She felt sorry for me. She saw a beaten-down housewife who was too stupid or too scared to fight for her share. She saw exactly what I wanted her to see. "Mrs. Vance," she asked again, "are you doing this under duress? Has your husband threatened you?" I stood up slowly. I kept my hands folded in front of me. I made sure my voice was small but clear. "No, Your Honor, I am not under duress. I just want peace. I want my son, and I want to be done with this. If giving him the assets is the price of my freedom, then I am willing to pay it." Jason let out a scoff, a short, sharp sound of derision. The judge shot him a glare, but he was too arrogant to care. "Very well," the judge sighed. She sounded disappointed. She picked up her pen. "If you are absolutely certain, and since you have legal representation, I cannot stop you from making a bad deal." She began to read the terms into the record. It was a litany of my apparent defeat. Item 1. The property located at 14 Dune Road, East Hampton, valued at approximately $10 million, transferred to the sole ownership of Jason Vance. I looked at Jason. He was beaming. He was thinking about the summer parties he would host. He was thinking about the status. I was thinking about the title search Marcus had shown me. I was thinking about the 3 mortgages layered on top of each other like a precarious house of cards. I was thinking about the foreclosure notice that was currently sitting in a processing center in Ohio, waiting to be mailed. By taking sole ownership, Jason was taking sole liability. He was hugging an anchor and calling it a trophy. Item 2, the judge continued. The penthouse apartment at 432 Park Avenue, transferred to the sole ownership of Jason Vance. Jason winked at his lawyer. Another victory. I kept my face impassive. The penthouse was leveraged against a crypto loan that had already been called in. The eviction notice for that property would arrive within the week. He didn't know it yet, but he was fighting for the right to be evicted. Item 3. The investment accounts held at Chase Citibank and the offshore entity Blue Horizon, transferred to the sole ownership of Jason Vance. This was the sweetest part. Blue Horizon, the account where he had hidden the stolen money. By claiming it in court, he was officially acknowledging it existed. He was putting his name on the deed of a shell company that was currently the target of a massive IRS audit. I had not just given him the money, I had given him the handcuffs. Item 4, the judge read, pausing slightly. Jason Vance waives all rights to any intellectual property software or digital creations made by Elena Vance. Elena Vance retains full ownership of her personal laptop and its contents. Jason checked his watch. He was bored. He didn't care about Item 4. He thought Item 4 was a mommy blog. He didn't know Item 4 was the Sentinel algorithm. He didn't know Item 4 was a $50 million check that had cleared into my secret account this morning. He didn't know that by waiving his rights, he had just legally insulated my fortune from his inevitable bankruptcy. The judge finished reading. She looked at me one last time. "Mrs. Vance, please approach the bench and sign the decree." I walked forward. My steps were steady on the carpet. I could feel Jason's eyes on my back. He was probably thinking about how pathetic I looked in my old coat. He was probably thinking about how he would tell Amber that he had crushed me. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. I looked at the document. It was a roadmap of his destruction. Every clause was a trapdoor, and he was standing on all of them. I signed my name, Elena Vance. The letters were crisp and clear. I handed the pen to Jason. He stood up and swaggered to the bench. He didn't even read the final page. He just signed it with a flourish, a big looping signature that took up half the line. "Done," Jason said, slapping the pen down. The judge banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. So ordered. The marriage is dissolved. The division of assets is final. Mr. Vance, you are responsible for filing the new deeds within 30 days. I will have my people handle it, Jason said dismissively. He turned to leave. He was already pulling out his phone, probably texting Amber that it was over, that they were rich, that the nag was gone. I stood there for a moment. I felt a bubble of laughter rising in my chest. It wasn't hysterical laughter. It was the laughter of relief. It was the laughter of a grandmaster who had just watched his opponent capture a pawn while leaving his king exposed. I turned to Jason. "Jason," I called out. He stopped near the door and turned around looking annoyed. "What is it, Elena? Do not ask me for gas money. The deal is done." I walked up to him. I stood close enough to smell his cologne, the same cologne he wore when he lied to me about working late. I smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile. It was the first time I had smiled at him in years. I just wanted to say thank you. I said, my voice sweet and sincere. Jason frowned. He squinted at me, confused. "Thank me for what? For taking everything?" "No," I said softly. "For being so generous. You have no idea what you just gave me." He looked at me, searching for sarcasm, searching for bitterness. But there was none. I was glowing. He laughed, but it was an uncertain sound. "You are crazy, Elena. I took the house. I took the money. You have nothing." I kept smiling. I reached out and patted his arm, a gesture of condescension that he didn't quite understand. "You keep thinking that, Jason. Enjoy the house. I really mean it." I walked past him. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. Mr. Henderson hurried after me, clutching his briefcase. "Elena, wait," he whispered as we got into the hallway. "Why were you so nice to him? He just stripped you bare." I stopped at the elevator. I pressed the button. "Mr. Henderson," I said, looking at the numbers light up. "Do you remember when I told you to trust me?" "Yes, but—" "Go back to your office," I said. "In about 48 hours, you are going to receive a call from Jason's lawyer. He is going to be screaming. He is going to threaten to sue. He is going to say there was a mistake." Mr. Henderson looked pale. "Why? What did you do?" I stepped into the elevator. I held the door open for a second. I didn't do anything I said. I just let him keep his secrets. The elevator doors closed, cutting off Mr. Henderson's confused face. I was alone in the elevator. I leaned my head back against the mirrored wall and closed my eyes. It was done. Jason owned the debts. I owned the future. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the real estate app Zillow. 14 Dune Road. Status update, pre-foreclosure. Public auction scheduled for next month. I swiped the notification away. Then another notification popped up. A breaking news alert from a tech blog. Industry rumor sentinel AI, the mysterious startup behind the new market prediction engine, has just been acquired by Google for an undisclosed sum. Sources say the sole founder is a woman who has remained anonymous until now. I looked at the screen. That was me. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. The air was cold, but it felt fresh. It felt clean. I saw Jason's driver waiting at the curb with the Rolls-Royce. Jason came out of the building a moment later, laughing into his phone. He got into the back seat looking like a king. I watched him drive away. "Goodbye, Jason," I whispered. I turned and walked toward the subway. I didn't need a Rolls-Royce. I had a kingdom to build, and the first brick had just been laid by the very man who thought he had torn it down. The final court hearing was over. But the real trial, Jason's trial by fire, was just about to begin. And I had a front row seat. 48 hours after the gavel fell in the Superior Court, I was sitting on my velvet sofa in the Manhattan penthouse, sipping peppermint tea. The city lights were twinkling below me, a sea of diamonds that I didn't need to steal to enjoy. On my laptop screen, a live feed played silently. I wasn't hacking. I was simply watching the security cameras of the Hamptons house. Jason, in his infinite arrogance, had forgotten that I was the one who installed the Ring system and the internal Nest cameras. He had changed the locks, but he hadn't changed the Wi-Fi password. To him, the internet was just magic that appeared in the air. To me, it was a window into his soul. And what a soul it was. The house was packed. Jason had wasted no time. He was hosting a freedom party. I could see the living room filled with people. I recognized some of them. There were his drinking buddies from the golf club men who cheated on their wives and bragged about their handicaps. There were a few of the younger associates from his failing firm, probably forced to attend to stroke the boss's ego. And in the center of it all was Amber. She was wearing a gold sequined dress that looked like it was trying too hard to be a disco ball. She was holding a magnum of champagne spinning around, spilling expensive bubbles onto the hardwood floors I used to polish. Jason was standing on my coffee table, raising a toast. I turned up the volume on my laptop. To freedom, Jason slurred. To shedding the dead weight and living the life we deserve. The crowd cheered. Amber shrieked with delight and kissed his ankle. It was grotesque. It was a carnival of vanity. But then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a long, insistent press. I watched on the front porch camera. A man in a cheap windbreaker was standing there. He wasn't a guest. He held a clipboard and a thick envelope. Jason hopped down from the table, looking annoyed. He stumbled to the door, swinging it open with a flourish. "Who invited the plumber?" Jason laughed, looking back at his guests. "Are you Jason Vance?" the man asked. His voice was flat, bored. "Yeah, I am Jason Vance, the owner of this castle." "What do you want?" The man shoved the envelope into Jason's chest. "You have been served," the man said. Jason frowned. "Served. What is this, another love letter from my ex-wife?" "It is a notice of default and acceleration from First National Bank," the man said, turning to walk away. "You are 90 days past due on the primary mortgage and the 3 HELOCs attached to the property." Jason froze. The laughter in the room died down as people sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "Wait!" Jason yelled, grabbing the man's arm. "That is a mistake. My ex-wife handles the bills. Talk to her." The man pulled his arm away. "Not anymore, buddy. We received the court order yesterday. The deed has been transferred to your sole name. That means the bank has triggered the due on sale clause because the original borrower profile has changed. And frankly, your credit score is garbage. They are calling the loan." "Calling the loan?" Jason stammered. The man got into his car. "It means you owe the full balance immediately, $18 million. You have 30 days to pay or vacate before the sheriff comes to throw you out. Have a nice night." The man drove away. Jason stood in the doorway, the freezing wind blowing into the house, swirling the snow around his expensive Italian loafers. He looked down at the envelope. He tore it open with shaking hands. I zoomed in on the interior camera as he walked back into the living room. His face was pale, the color of old oatmeal. Amber ran up to him. "Babe, what is it? Is it a gift?" Jason looked at her, his eyes wild. "They are taking the house," he whispered. "What?" Amber laughed nervously. "Stop joking. We just won the house. The judge gave it to us." Jason looked around the room. The guests were staring. He grabbed a piece of paper from the envelope. "The debt," Jason choked out. "The debt follows the deed. Elena. She gave me the deed." He looked at the paper again, reading the numbers. Principal balance $10 million. HELOC 13 million. HELOC 2 million. HELOC 3 million. Total amount due $18 million. He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a dying bird. She knew, Jason whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She knew it was underwater. That is why she didn't fight. That is why she smiled. Amber snatched the paper up. She scanned it, her eyes widening. 18 million, she screeched. "Jason, you told me you were rich. You told me this house was an asset." "It is," Jason yelled, panic setting in. "It is a mansion. It is a debt trap," Amber screamed. She threw her champagne glass. It shattered against the fireplace. The guests started to shuffle awkwardly. One by one, they began to grab their coats. Nobody wanted to be at a party that had turned into a funeral. But the night wasn't over. I took a sip of my tea. The first shoe had dropped. Now for the second. On the screen, Jason's phone started ringing. He ignored it. He was busy staring at the wall, hyperventilating. It rang again and again. "Answer it, Jason," Amber yelled. "Make it stop." Jason pulled the phone out of his pocket. He looked at the screen. "It is Marcus," he muttered. "Great. He probably wants to gloat." He put the phone to his ear. I couldn't hear Marcus's side of the conversation through the security camera, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what Marcus was saying because I had written the script for him. "What do you want?" Marcus Jason snapped. "I am not in the mood." I watched Jason's face. If he looked pale before, he now looked translucent. His knees actually buckled. He had to grab the back of the sofa to stay upright. "What do you mean?" Jason whispered into the phone. He listened for a long moment. "No." Jason shouted. "No, that is impossible. I moved that money to the Cayman Islands. It is tax-free." "That is the whole point." He listened again. He started sweating profusely. Beads of perspiration were rolling down his forehead. 40%, he shrieked. But the crypto crashed. "It is worth pennies now." He listened. "I do not have $2 million. Marcus, I do not have $2,000. The bank just called the house loan." He dropped the phone. It didn't break. It just lay there on the Persian rug, the voice on the other end still tinny and audible. Jason sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. Amber was standing over him. Her hands were on her hips. The gold sequins on her dress suddenly looked cheap and tacky. What now, she demanded. "What did Marcus say?" Jason looked up. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "The IRS," Jason croaked. "What about them?" "When I took the offshore accounts in the divorce," Jason swallowed hard, "I officially claimed ownership of them. Marcus just told me that by transferring the titles, I triggered a taxable event. The IRS views it as income repatriation." So Amber asked, "Just pay the tax, use the money in the account." "There is no money in the account," Jason screamed, standing up and flipping the coffee table over. The crystal vase smashed. The appetizers went flying. I lost it all on that stupid coin last month. "But the IRS taxes you based on the value at the time of the transfer, not the current value. They say I owe tax on $5 million of movement." He pulled at his hair. "I owe the government $2 million in taxes on money I have already lost. And because I signed the divorce decree taking full ownership, Elena is exempt. It is all on me. All of it." Amber stared at him. She looked at the overturned table. She looked at the foreclosure notice on the floor. She looked at the man she had stolen from his wife, thinking she was stealing a king. "You are broke," she stated. It wasn't a question. Jason looked at her, pleading. "Babe, we can fix this. We can sell the cars." "The cars are leased," Amber yelled. "I checked the glove box yesterday. You do not own anything, Jason. You are a fraud." She turned around and started walking toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" Jason asked, his voice trembling. "To pack," Amber said. "I am not staying in a house that is being foreclosed on, and I am certainly not dating a guy who is going to jail for tax evasion." She ran up the stairs. Jason stood alone in the middle of the ruined living room. The party guests were gone. The music had stopped. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the sound of his own heavy breathing. He looked around the room, bewildered. He looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare. "Elena," he whispered. He said my name like a curse. He said it like a prayer. I sat in my penthouse watching him on the screen. I felt a profound sense of closure. He had wanted everything. He had wanted the house, the accounts, the prestige. He had fought so hard to take them from me, and I had given them to him. I had given him the rope, tied the noose, and set up the chair. All he had to do was kick it over, and he had done it with such enthusiasm. I closed the laptop. The show was over. The villain had been defeated not by a sword, but by his own greed. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, people were rushing to dinner, rushing to meetings, living their lives. They had no idea that high above them, a woman who used to clip coupons was now standing on top of the world. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Message delivery complete. He is crying. Amber is calling an Uber. I smiled. Reply, thank you, Marcus. Your student loans are paid off. Check your email. I put the phone down. I walked into the kitchen where Leo was eating a bowl of mac and cheese that had been prepared by a private chef. He looked up, his face covered in cheese sauce. Mommy, are you happy? He asked. I kissed the top of his head. Yes, baby, I said. Mommy is very happy. The bomb had dropped. The dust was settling. And in the silence that followed, I could finally hear the sound of my own future beginning. Jason had the house. I had the victory. And the best part, he still had no idea that the final blow, the one involving the software he thought was worthless, was still to come. The foreclosure and the taxes were just the appetizers. The main course was going to be served cold, and it was going to cost him $50 million, 1 week. That was exactly how long it took for gravity to do its work. For 7 days I had stayed in my penthouse, watching the world turn from my floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping tea and playing Legos with Leo. It was a quiet, peaceful existence, the kind of silence that costs a lot of money to buy in New York City. But 30 miles away in the Hamptons, the silence was being shattered. I knew Jason was falling apart. I knew it because I had the notifications set up on my phone. First came the lien alerts on the house, then the frantic calls from his car leasing company, then the news that his partners at the venture capital firm had voted to oust him due to reputational risk following the tax evasion rumors. He was a man trapped in a golden box that was rapidly filling with water, and he had no idea that the snorkel he needed was the very thing he had thrown away in court. On Tuesday morning, I sat on the balcony, wrapping my hands around a warm mug. I turned on the television to CNBC. I knew the segment was airing at 9 o'clock. I had timed it perfectly. The anchor, a woman with sharp features and a serious demeanor, looked into the camera. Breaking news in the tech world this morning, she announced. Silicon Valley giant Alphatech has just confirmed the acquisition of a mysterious AI startup known as Sentinel Logic. The deal finalized late last night is valued at $50 million in cash and stock options. I took a sip of tea. The liquid was warm, but satisfaction was warmer. The anchor continued. Sentinel Logic has been the subject of intense speculation for months. Its predictive trading algorithm has quietly outperformed every major hedge fund model this quarter. Until today, the founder remained anonymous, but filings released this morning reveal that the sole architect and owner of the code is a woman named Elena Vance. The screen flashed a picture of me. It was not the picture Jason had of me, the one where I looked tired wearing an apron holding a baby. It was a new headshot I had taken 3 days ago. I looked powerful. I looked sharp. I looked like a CEO. Ms. Vance, a former freelance coder, reportedly built the algorithm entirely on her own. Sources say she retains 100% of the equity, making this one of the most lucrative solo exits in recent tech history. I smiled. It was done. The world knew. And more importantly, Jason knew. I didn't have to wait long. 40 minutes later, the intercom in my apartment buzzed. It was the concierge downstairs. Ms. Vance, the concierge, said, his voice polite but strained. There is a Mr. Jason Vance here to see you. He is quite agitated. He says he is your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected gently. Let him up, James. It is okay. I have been expecting him. I unlocked the front door and left it ajar. I walked back to the living room and poured 2 glasses of wine. One was a vintage Cabernet, smooth and rich. The other was the cheap, acidic swill Jason used to buy for me while he drank the good stuff. I placed them on the marble coffee table next to a single sheet of paper. I heard the elevator ding. I heard heavy, hurried footsteps stomping down the hallway. The door flew open. Jason stood there. He looked like a man who had been through a war and lost every battle. His suit was wrinkled, the same one he had worn to court, as if he hadn't slept or changed in days. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was wild and greasy. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving with rage and panic. He looked around my penthouse. He took in the view of the Empire State Building. He took in the modern art on the walls. He took in the sheer, undeniable wealth that surrounded me. "You," he rasped, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Hello, Jason," I said calmly. I gestured to the cheap glass of wine. "You look thirsty." He ignored the wine. He marched into the room, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You sold it!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "I saw the news. You sold the code for $50 million. I nodded slowly. $52 million, actually, if you count the signing bonus. But who is counting? "That is marital property," Jason roared. He slammed his fist onto the back of my sofa. "We were married when you wrote that code. We were married when you built that company. That algorithm belongs to the community estate." He began to pace the room, his hands flying in the air, manic and desperate. "I know the law, Elena. Anything created during the marriage is 50-50. You defrauded the court. You hid an asset. I am going to sue you. I am going to get an emergency injunction. I am going to take half of that money. No, I am going to take all of it for fraud." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of greed and fury. $50 million, he whispered the number, staggering him. "And you tried to keep it all. You thought you could trick me. You thought I was stupid." I sat perfectly still. I crossed my legs. I picked up my glass of good wine and swirled it, watching the red liquid coat the sides. "I didn't trick you, Jason," I said softly. "You did," he yelled. "You never told me it was worth that much. You told me it was a hobby. You told me it was a blog." I took a slow sip of wine. "No, Jason. You told me it was a blog. You told me it was trash. You told me my work was worthless, junk files taking up space on a hard drive. I simply agreed with you. That doesn't matter," he spat. "The value was hidden. That voids the agreement. I am calling my lawyer right now. We are going to freeze your accounts. You are not seeing a dime of that money until I get my share. I need that money. Elena." His voice broke on the last sentence. The rage slipped, revealing the terrified desperation underneath. "The bank is taking the house," he choked out. "The IRS is auditing the Cayman account. I am ruined, Elena. I have nothing. That $50 million is mine. It is ours. You owe me this. I supported you for 7 years. I put the wine glass down." The sound of crystal touching marble was sharp and final. I reached for the piece of paper on the table. It was a certified copy of the divorce decree, the ink still fresh, the court seal embossed in red wax at the bottom. I picked it up and held it out to him. "Read it, Jason." He stared at the paper. "I know what it says." "Read it." I commanded, my voice dropping an octave, becoming hard and cold as steel. "Read item 4. The clause you laughed at. The clause you forced your lawyer to write because you were so arrogant you couldn't wait to get to your victory party." Jason snatched the paper from my hand. His eyes scanned the page frantically. He found item 4. "Jason Vance hereby waives any and all claims, rights, titles, and interests in any intellectual property, creative works, software code, or digital assets created by Elena Vance during the course of the marriage. This waiver applies to all past, present, and future revenue derived from said works, regardless of value or commercial success." He stopped reading. His lips moved silently, rereading the words, regardless of value. I stood up and walked over to him. I was not afraid. I was the giant in the room now. "You signed it, Jason," I said. "You didn't just sign it. You insisted on it. You mocked me while you did it. You called my life's work a sad little hobby, and you gave it away for free because you wanted to keep the house." Jason looked up from the paper. The color drained from his face completely. The paper shook in his hands. "But," he stammered, "but I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a legal defense," I said. "You had a lawyer. You had the opportunity to audit my laptop. You chose not to. You chose to underestimate me. You looked at me and saw a housewife. You didn't look close enough to see the architect." I took the paper back from his trembling fingers. "You wanted the visible wealth, Jason. You wanted the things you could touch, the things you could show off to your friends. The mansion, the cars, the title. So I gave them to you. and with them, I gave you the debt that sustains them. I stepped closer, invading his personal space, forcing him to look at me. I chose the invisible wealth. I chose the intellect. I chose the potential. And because you were so busy looking in the mirror, you let me walk out the door with $50 million in my pocket. Jason fell to his knees. It wasn't metaphorical. He literally collapsed onto the rug, his legs giving out under the weight of his realization. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "Elena, please," he begged. "We can fix this. We can remarry. I love you. I made a mistake." Amber meant nothing. "Please do not leave me like this. I will go to jail." I looked down at him. I felt a flicker of memory the day I married him, thinking he was my partner. But that man was dead. The thing on the floor was just a parasite that had finally run out of a host. I didn't feel pity. I felt clean. I walked back to the table and picked up my wine. "You wanted the house, Jason," I said, my voice echoing in the large, beautiful room. "You have the house, and the $18 million in debt." I took a sip. "You wanted the cars. You have the cars, and the lease payments." I looked down at him one last time. I wanted my freedom and my mind. Now I have both, and I have the capital to enjoy them. Jason reached out for my hand, grasping at the air. "Elena, we both got exactly what we wanted," I said. "It is the fairest deal in history." I turned my back on him and walked toward the door. I pressed the button on the wall that summoned the building security. "You have 2 minutes to leave before the guards drag you out," I said without looking back. "And Jason," he looked up, broken and sobbing, "do not touch the wine on your way out. It is cheap, just like you." I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I heard him scream, a long, guttural sound of pure agony. Then I heard the security guards arrive. I heard the scuffle. I heard the elevator doors close, then silence. I walked to the balcony and looked out at the city. The wind whipped my hair, but I wasn't cold. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank balance. The number was long filled with commas and zeros. $52,400,000. I smiled. I texted Marcus one last time. Message: "It is done. He is gone. Dinner is on me tonight. Bring the champagne." I put the phone away and raised my glass to the skyline. "To the underestimate," I whispered, "and to the sweet, silent art of the upgrade." 6 months have passed since that day. Jason is currently living in a rented studio apartment in New Jersey, working as a junior analyst for a firm that used to beg for his business. The Hamptons house was sold at auction for a fraction of its value, leaving him with a massive deficiency judgment he will be paying off for decades. He still calls me sometimes, usually late at night, asking if we can talk about Leo. I always direct him to my assistant. As for me, I am writing this from the deck of my new beach house in Malibu. Leo is breathing the clean ocean air and his asthma has almost disappeared. The lesson I learned is simple. True power isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It isn't about the showy car or the big mansion. True power is silence. It is the ability to let people underestimate you while you are holding all the aces. Jason thought he could strip me of my worth because he defined worth by material things. He didn't realize that my greatest asset wasn't the house he stole. It was the mind he ignored. If this story of silent revenge gave you the satisfaction you were looking for, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was watching his face when he realized the worthless blog was actually a $50 million empire. What was your favorite moment? Tell me in the comments below. And if you want more stories about women who turn the tables on those who doubt them, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know when the next lesson in justice will be served.